Are they well-being index?
It relates to the wellbeing index. I'll come on to the wellbeing index later. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's have a quick tour of the state of Australia's environment and try to be cheery. New Zealand just released its most recent State of Environment report. It's got a longer reporting cycle, 10 years, but you might be interested if you know New Zealand or want to have a look at a comparator, to have a look at the New Zealand State of Environment report that's just been released. So here's a picture from the 2001 State of Environment report about natural and cultural heritage, and it's the sort of page you'll see when you go to the web pages. You'll also find that there's a whole range of other information processes that support state of environment reporting at both the federal and the state levels, and you'll now also find that most Australian states have their own state of the state environment reporting, and they're all linked from the State of Environment webpage. So if you're interested in a particular state, for example, you can link to that from the State of Environment report webpage and have a look at what's being said about a particular state. So I want to draw your attention to some of the background information processes because you might find them relevant to work you're doing at particular times. This is the National Land and Water Resources Audit. So the name's fairly self-explanatory. Its job is to assemble and catalogue and present information relevant to land and water. And it's got its own web page, but the information that this activity generates is part of the information base that's used for state of environment reporting. We just talked about the ABS work. Here's another of the publications, another of the studies that they produced in 2003 about trends in Australia's environment from data that they've been collecting. And you'll see if you look at that list that most of the indicators aren't very encouraging, particularly the bottom point there that I'm sure you know that over the past decade in general, perhaps with the exception of about 6 months ago, Australians have become progressively less concerned about the environment. But you can pat yourselves on the back that people in the ACT remain those who are most concerned about the environment amongst Australians.
Isn't it, like we were told in previous lectures that environmental concern is growing as a state, and like
just get our story straight, wouldn't we? Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's true that if we look at the conjunction of the drought in Australia, of the global change in awareness about climate change, and link that to political events in Australia, we could say that there's pretty good evidence that over the last 6 months or year, Australia, this trend, so this is from 2003, okay, that this trend has been at least temporarily reversed. What I haven't seen are any surveys from sources like the ABS that confirm that, but I agree, I think that seems to be the case. Okay, so I'll just talk to 1 or 2 slides for each of the reporting themes to give you some idea of the key messages that are coming out. And here's one from the 2001 report that wouldn't be any surprise, shows the increase in temperature over the last century. The progressive, inexorable rise in mean temperature over the last 100 years in Australia. In terms of biodiversity, here's a set of the summary observations about biodiversity, noting some positives, some of which are sort of fairly faint positives, that land clearing is recognised as a threat to biodiversity. You heard, we got there at last. Quite some significant negatives about the fragmentation and loss of ecosystems that continues, and the impacts of exotic pests and weeds. And each of these reporting things also notes what they call significant uncertainties. And one of those that continues to be a significant uncertainty is the relationship between fire regime. I'll talk about fire regime in a couple of weeks when I come back for a panel session on that topic, and biodiversity. And I've already given a little advertisement for this wonderful commentary that I contributed to on fire and biodiversity, so you can read all about that in the next couple of weeks if you'd like to. Here are some graphics to illustrate some of those points. Two pictures, one from the 2001 State of Environment report, that's the one in light blue and black, and one from the 2006 report in green and blue, if you're not colourblind. And you can see that during the 1990s, Australia ranked amongst the world's top countries for clearing of natural ecosystems. We were ranked 5th. There are two different estimates from Australia, one from the NGO, the ACF, and one from the government, but they're about the same. And in the slide on the bottom from 2006, a bit later, you can see that that rate of land clearing accelerated again during the period after, in the first part of the 2000s. So we've had a pretty significant land clearing issue in Australia over the last 10 years or so. One of the consequences of that that's very serious for biodiversity loss, besides the direct impact of the land that's cleared, is the fragmentation of remnant vegetation. And this is a map from the 2001 State of Environment report that depicts the extent of fragmentation in different regions of Australia. Australia is divided into 85 biogeographical regions. They're regions that have similar environmental and ecosystem characteristics. And the more red the picture is, the worse things are. So you can see that in those parts of Australia that have been cleared for agriculture or close to our major population centres, generally we've fragmented the natural ecosystems very substantially, and that's got significant adverse impacts on biodiversity. The third reporting theme is about coasts and oceans. Australia's a very coastal nation in terms of our population distribution, but there are some positive, and that population distribution's got some pretty substantial impacts on our coasts. But there are positives as well, and here's the positives in terms of the number of humpback whales migrating down the east coast, an issue that continues to be a very live issue.
So it increased, yeah?
Yep. So in 1962 there was about 100 whales a year, 1996 2,500, so a pretty dramatic consequence of the impact of whaling bans. Returning to a topic we've already discussed, the fourth theme focuses on human settlements, and here's that picture of energy usage. Total energy in blue. I'm not sure what final energy is, I'm sorry, I should have done a bit more homework before I came. Renewable energy running along there, hardly increasing at all over the period 1975 to 2010. As a consequence, one would have to say, of deliberate policy decisions made by successive Australian governments.
Final must be non-renewable.
Final
must by definition be non-renewable.
No, it's not, because if you look at the graphs, I think it adds up that way. I shall report back on what final energy means. I have no idea on that. I just know the picture looks bad. The fifth reporting theme is, depending on the State of Environment report, either called freshwater, which is a bit of a misnomer in Australia because all our freshwater is not very fresh, so it's often called inland water. And this is a map that shows our groundwater resources, so you'd be aware that water can be surface water or groundwater, and for a lot of Australia with low rainfall, groundwater is the principal water reserve. This map shows the extent to which those groundwater reserves are allocated for use, and red means greater than 100%. So with groundwater, as with freshwater, we've committed to using more of it than we can sustain. It's a pretty serious problem that we have in a very dry continent.